When the general took the jade pendant to find his savior, my sister falsely claimed the credit. Later, she married into the general's household, becoming the first-class military commander's wife. Meanwhile, I was forced to marry the impoverished scholar who had been having an affair with my sister. Unexpectedly, after her marriage, my sister grew weary of managing the household, finding it too laborious. She despised the general's boisterous and unrestrained nature, deeming him utterly crude. While I was away, she secretly consorted with the poor scholar. When the general discovered the truth, he confined her to the courtyard. She soon died of illness. Meanwhile, the poor scholar passed all 3 imperial examinations, destined to become the future chief minister. When I opened my eyes again, my sister pushed me toward the general, then threw herself into the poor scholar's arms. This time, I will be the chief minister's wife. I nearly laughed. If I hadn't strained my eyes saving money for him and repeatedly predicted the exam questions, that poor scholar with venereal disease would never have passed the provincial exams. As I was pushed into a man's arms, my body trembled, instinctively curling into a ball. Just as terror gripped my heart, the man beside me gently grasped my arm. "Do not fear, young lady." Startled, I looked up to find General Mu's slightly furrowed brows meeting mine. "TSK, why all the fuss, little sister? I merely touched you lightly. What are you pretending? Do you wish to make a scene before General Mu to impress your elder sister? General Mu, this younger sister of mine saved your life. If you desire her, simply take her as your wife." I looked up in realization and saw my legitimate sister walking over to the poor scholar beside us, acting intimately with him. Only then did I realize Wanzhou and I had reincarnated together. After saving General Mu in my previous life, he revealed his identity and asked whose daughter I was, vowing to repay the favor someday. I admit, I wanted to use this chance to escape the Su family. So I gave my jade pendant to General Mu. But when General Mu came seeking me with that pendant, Wanzhou eagerly claimed the identity of my savior. Not only that, she forced me to marry the penniless scholar with whom she'd had an affair. Later, she became the general's wife, basking in glory, yet still unsatisfied. While I was away, she came to my home to commit adultery with that scholar. Alas, the general discovered the truth and confined her to the courtyard. She soon died of illness. Her death coincided with the day the penniless scholar passed the imperial examination as top scholar. So this time, Wanzhou collapsed into Du Kang's arms, her laughter maniacal. "This time, it's my turn to be the top scholar's wife, you know." I laughed. Had I not worked myself blind saving money for him, repeatedly predicting the exam questions? That penniless scholar, who spent every spare moment in brothels, would never have amounted to anything. And what's more, after Du Kang became chief minister, he wanted to replace me, his wife of humble origins, so he smeared me with slander. He himself caught a venereal disease in the brothel, yet he turned it around and accused me of being unfaithful. Thus, I was poisoned to death by Du Kang, yet the entire capital cheered. My elder sister didn't know about these things. My stepmother understood even less. She was poking Wanzhou's head in frustration. "You didn't even consult me about something this big. That's the general's residence, how could you give it to that little slut?" Wanzhou wrapped her arms around her stepmother, coaxing her with sweet talk. Whatever she said managed to ease the frown on her stepmother's brow. Fine. I'll speak to your father about it later." I walked away with a satisfied smile. In my past life, they conspired to push me into the fire pit. This time around, Wanzhou was finally about to jump in herself. The next day, the mansion descended into chaos. "What's happening outside?" The maid helped sort my dowry while explaining, the young Miss feared father would refuse her marriage to that poor scholar, so last night she committed adultery with him in the courtyard. Father discovered it this morning and is furious. I lowered my gaze, a cold smile playing on my lips. In my past life, my father raged because I refused to marry Du Kang. This lifetime, however, was the opposite. Indeed, the distinction between legitimate and illegitimate daughters extended beyond mere status. An illegitimate daughter couldn't even escape her own father's gaze. Half a month later, Wanzhou and I were married together. The difference was, this time, the one seated in the grand palanquin carried by 8 bearers was me. Su Wanzhou, meanwhile, was placed in the tattered little sedan chair beside it. As she passed by me, Su Wanzhou gritted her teeth and spat out a threat. "Don't get too cocky. You'll have your day of tears yet. So what if the Du family is penniless? My parents adore me, my dowry is 10 times yours." I smiled faintly. "Worried your dowry won't last?" Before Su Wanzhou could retort, I spoke first. "Sister, take it easy. I hear your husband's family has another unmarried sister, cherished like a precious jewel by all. I hope you'll get along well with her." With that, I climbed into the sedan chair. The Du family truly was a bottomless pit, forcing their daughter-in-law to use her dowry to prop up the household. Du Kang's mother, in particular, flaunted her seniority, acting like a tyrant every day and secretly tormenting people with needles. The bond between his sister and brother was so intimate that no third person could ever come between them. Such a hellish place, I wonder if Su Wanzhou could endure it. Unlike the Du family's utter chaos. The general's mansion was once a house of loyal heroes, but now the vast Mu residence stood with only General Mu remaining. On our wedding night, General Mu entered the room only after a long delay. My heart raced when I saw those black boots. In my past life, the first time I met Muze, he was covered in blood, as if he'd been ambushed. This time, his complexion was rosy and his back straight, he seemed fully recovered. Just as I was nervously wondering what to say, Muze had a table laden with wine and dishes brought in. Staring at the lavish spread before me, I froze. "General, this." Muze gently removed my heavy crown and guided me to sit at the table. "My lady has gone hungry all day. On our wedding night, how could you not partake of your own celebratory feast?" I was utterly dumbfounded, yet my stomach growled uncontrollably. "But this. How could I possibly accept?" Muze chuckled softly, plucking a chicken drumstick and placing it in my hand. "We only drank wine outside earlier. Just think of this as accompanying me for a little more food." I lowered my gaze, a faint smile curving my lips. In my past life with the Du family, I'd been tormented all night on my wedding night by Du Kang's sister, who'd feigned illness. Reflecting on it now, Su Wanzhou truly was the one who didn't know how good she had it. Muze and I drank from the ceremonial cup together. As the fiery liquor slid down my throat, Muze squeezed my hand. His large, calloused palm made me blush suddenly. His voice was hoarse. "Madam, it's time for bed." When I awoke again, the sun was already high in the sky. When Muze returned from court, I hadn't even dressed properly yet. "Why didn't you wake me, General?" Muze pressed my shoulders, guiding me to sit before the dressing mirror. "Since you've come to the Mu household, you are its sole mistress. What harm is there in sleeping a little longer in your own home?" Muze gazed at my reflection in the mirror and even helped me pin up my hair. Watching his earnest, proper movements, I couldn't help but laugh. "So these hands of yours aren't just for battle, they can also style a maiden's hair?" After securing the hairpin, Muze finally looked at me. "Before you arrived, my dear, I deliberately spent many hours mastering the skill." I was startled, my cheeks flushing crimson once more. Su Wanzhou despised Muze for his rustic ways, but I couldn't detect a trace of it. In the Su household, no one ever taught this concubine-born daughter how to manage a household. Muze directly invited an experienced matron from the palace to instruct me personally. In just 2 short days, I learned more than I had in over a decade at the Su residence. Compared to my days at the Du household, where I tended to the entire family without a moment's rest, my present life filled me with profound contentment. On the day of my return visit, Muze accompanied me back early in the morning. When we arrived, Su Wanzhou, Du Kang, and the entire Su family were waiting at the mansion gates. Su Wanzhou curled her lip in disdain upon seeing me. My father and legitimate mother, however, gazed at Muze with fawning expressions. "Come in quickly." The two of them tried to usher Muze inside. But Muze didn't move. He glanced back at me. Only after I nodded did he step forward first. "Let's go." If he doesn't move, how can Su Wanzhou speak freely? Now that my sister is the general's wife, her airs are truly extraordinary. Today is the day for the return visit. We could have waited, but instead, we made our parents wait for you at the gate for half the day. I raised an eyebrow at her, then continued along her line of reasoning. Sister, you know I'm the general's wife. Shouldn't you pay your respects upon meeting me? My father was merely a fifth-rank official. In my previous life, if I hadn't saved someone, the Su family would never have been able to climb their way into the general's residence. Su Wanzhou was taken aback by my words. She stiffened her neck and glared at me, refusing to bow. Very well. I adjusted my skirt hem. As sisters, I naturally won't hold this against you. But whether General Mu might deem you arrogant and thus jeopardize my brother-in-law's future prospects, that I cannot say. At these words, Su Wanzhou immediately gritted her teeth and knelt to perform the proper bow. I deliberately extended my hand, showing her my newly painted nails, dyed with cardamom. Sister, do you think they look nice? I hear my brother-in-law studies diligently at home each day. Why not dye one nail yourself? When you lend your elegant touch to his studies, wouldn't it add a touch of charm? I spoke slowly and deliberately, while Su Wanzhou remained frozen in her kneeling position. Having been pampered since childhood, she began trembling after only a moment. Su Qingyan, are you deliberately trying to make things difficult for me? Sister, what do you mean by that? I asked sincerely. Before I was married, didn't you and mother often teach me this way? My mother died young and was never favored in the household. Over time, she became a plaything for the legitimate mother and Su Wanzhou. Bearing a teacup on her head while maintaining the bowing posture for a quarter of an hour was the lightest punishment. Su Qingyan, don't think becoming a general's wife makes you special. My husband has grand ambitions, becoming chief minister is child's play. Just as I was about to speak, the matron attending the legitimate mother stepped forward. Young mistress, second young mistress, the lady awaits inside. The old nurse appeared kind and honest, yet when she saw Su Wanzhou bowing to me, the hatred in her eyes nearly killed me. I glanced at her, then slowly said, "Rise." The old nurse hurried back into the courtyard. I guessed she must have gone to tattle. Sure enough, by the time I arrived, Mu Zhe and Du Kang had already been summoned by my father to the study for tea. The first thing I saw upon entering was my stepmother's sour face. Su Wanzhou stormed in, then pouted and called out mother in a pitiful tone. My stepmother immediately snorted coldly and sipped her tea. Seeing my calm composure, she slammed her teacup down. What? Have you truly become so arrogant as to disown your own kin just because you're a general's wife? Have you forgotten all the manners I taught you at home? I lowered my gaze and respectfully curtsied to my stepmother, but she still tried to discipline me with old methods. She patted Su Wanzhou's hand affectionately. How is life at the Du household? Has your mother-in-law been treating you well? I sent you such a generous dowry. They should hold you in high regard. Su Wanzhou's expression flickered uncomfortably for a moment before smoothing back into place. She shot me a sidelong glance, then stamped her foot in feigned coyness. Mother, how could I be mistreated? My husband treats me wonderfully. As mother and daughter chatted animatedly, I simply smoothed my skirt and sat down on a chair. Ugh! My mother slammed the table. Look at yourself! You have no manners whatsoever. Those who know your background as a concubine's daughter might think you're as petty as your mother. Those who don't might blame me, your legitimate mother, for failing to raise you properly. At the mention of my aunt, I looked up at her for the first time. In this vast mansion, she might have played a part in my aunt's death. You dare glare at me? She leapt to her feet, striding over to grab me by the throat. This was her usual tactic. After all, injuries on the body were invisible to others. But this time, I raised my hand and pushed her away. My mother staggered back, caught by Su Wanzhou. Mother and daughter stared at me in shock. No wonder. Until now, I'd always been meek and submissive. I gave them a cold glance, then ordered the maid behind me, "Go fetch the general back. We're leaving." No! My mother shrieked. Leaving now? What will people say? What else could they say? Naturally, they'd say the worst possible things. But the gossip wouldn't concern us anyway. Mu Zhe arrived in hurried strides, his brow slightly furrowed. Having spent years battling on the battlefield, he carried an aura of command without needing to raise his voice. My father jogged up behind him, and the mother and daughter, who had been so arrogant moments ago, instantly fell silent. The lady wishes to return to the manor? My stepmother approached with an awkward smile, reaching out to pull me closer. I was just joking. Why would you leave when everything is fine? Muse beat her to it, pulling me into his embrace, leaving her hand grasping at thin air. My father stepped in to smooth things over. Exactly. Qingyan, you mustn't be so willful. Before I could speak, Muse interjected with a cool, detached tone. If Qingyan hadn't suffered injustice, she wouldn't demand to leave without cause. With that, Muse took my hand and led me out the door. Seeing his attempts to stop us were futile, my father shouted from behind to prepare the carriage. But at the gate, Muse simply mounted the chestnut horse and held out his hand to me. Amidst the bustling street, he pulled me onto the horse in full view of everyone. The marriage of the two Su daughters 3 days prior was common knowledge. Now, less than half an hour after my return, I was leaving again. The gossip would surely spread. Before departing, I heard my father's furious rebuke. What are you all staring at? My stepmother opened her mouth to speak, only to be cut off by my father's scathing retort, and you can't even be a proper stepmother, just bringing me shame. This was the first time my stepmother had ever been bested in front of me. On the way back, I couldn't help but let a smile touch my lips. Muse held me tightly in his embrace. His breath was warm against me. I tilted my head slightly and met his deep, intense gaze, feeling my ears burn. After returning to the mansion, I couldn't resist asking, why didn't you even ask why I suddenly came back? Muse didn't even lift his head. You're my wife. If you wish to return, you return. What reason do you need? I paused, then smiled. Within half a day, the news of the general's wife leaving her in-laws' home after a mere half-hour visit spread like wildfire through the streets. My father held no high office, but he valued his reputation above all else. With this happening, who knew how furious he'd be back at the manor? The story circulated for 3 full days. Worried the fire wasn't hot enough, I secretly had someone add fuel to the flames. Then, on the 4th day, Muse returned from court and said, father-in-law was reprimanded by the emperor during morning court today. Because of that day? Seeing Muse nod, I felt an immense sense of satisfaction. What I hadn't anticipated was that my stepmother came personally that very afternoon. When I saw the clearly swollen half of her face, the mockery in my eyes nearly spilled out. In my previous life, when I went hungry in the Su household and was openly and covertly oppressed by my stepmother, my own father never once stood up for me. Once, when I finally couldn't take it anymore and went to complain to him, he even scolded me and threw me out of his study. This time, I merely brought to light the dirty deeds she'd been committing for years, and suddenly he was playing the role of the loving father again. It was utterly sickening. Mother, what brings you here today? This time, she dared not show me the slightest disrespect. But as she spoke, she suddenly burst into tears. Last time, it was all our fault. But my original intention was to teach you more propriety, so you wouldn't be laughed at in the general's mansion. Ah, the heart of a parent. Qingyan, look at how fierce the rumors outside have become. Everyone says you and Wanzhou don't get along. I sipped my tea. What everyone says is the truth. My stepmother fell silent, unable to speak for a long while. Watching her stammering, I felt deeply troubled. I finally asked, what exactly brought you here today, mother? She dabbed her face with a handkerchief, as if resolved to speak her mind. Qingyan, you must know, your father was reprimanded by the emperor over this very matter. Surely you can't bear to see your father's career hindered over this? My patience wore thin. Speak plainly. Would you go to the Wanzhou household? I froze in shock. If you visit them, the rumors will dispel themselves. Then your father can report back to the emperor, and I won't have to. Seeing the fleeting hurt on her face, I agreed decisively. All right, I'll go tomorrow. My stepmother seemed not to have heard clearly. What? I'll pay them a visit tomorrow. Seeing the stunned look on my stepmother's face, I smiled. A golden opportunity to see Su Wanzhou looking utterly miserable. How could I pass it up? Early the next morning, I made a grand entrance at the Du residence. When I arrived, my spoiled sister stood demurely beside Du Kang's mother. Du Kang's mother, who had despised me in my previous life, now greeted me with a beaming smile. "You must be the sister of my son's wife? My, you truly live up to being a general's wife, your bearing is truly remarkable. Nothing like the one we married into our family, so spoiled and delicate, always complaining of headaches or aching hips." Wanzhou stood behind me, grinding her teeth so hard they might shatter. I smiled without responding, glancing around the room. The Du household remained unchanged. Most of the servants were those Wanzhou had brought from her own home. Du Kang's mother continued her chatter. "Qing Yan, your presence here truly graces our humble abode. Our families must maintain close ties. Should my son pass the imperial examinations, our union of scholar and warrior would be unbeatable. We'd fear no one, not even the heavens themselves." I offered no reply, merely lowering my gaze with a cold chuckle. Wanzhou, standing behind me, grew frantic. "Mother! What nonsense are you spouting? If word of this gets out, our entire family could be executed." Du Kang's mother first studied my expression. Seeing I remained silent, she immediately stiffened her face and snapped, "What business is it of yours what we say? Your sister is here today, hurry to the kitchen and prepare 2 of your signature dishes. One day without discipline, and you've forgotten your place." Wanzhou's eyes welled up with tears. But what puzzled me was how she managed to swallow her pride. Until I heard Du Kang's mother declare, "If you disobey, I'll have Du Kang divorce you. Our family is a scholarly lineage, we cannot tolerate a daughter-in-law who shows no respect to her mother-in-law." It dawned on me. Regardless of how much genuine affection existed between Wanzhou and Du Kang, given that Du Kang had passed the imperial examinations as a top scholar in his previous life and become the chief minister, Wanzhou simply couldn't leave no matter what. After a moment of silence, Wanzhou reluctantly admitted her mistake. But before retreating, she shot me a furious glare. I really had nothing to say to this old woman, Du Kang's mother. After forcing a brief conversation, I made an excuse to go to the kitchen. At the doorway, I spotted Wanzhou awkwardly stoking the fire, her face blackened by smoke. I couldn't help but snort in disdain. If mother saw her precious daughter living like this at the Su household, she'd probably rush over in heartbreak, wouldn't she? Wanzhou's fire-stoking motion halted abruptly. She angrily flung the firewood onto the ground. "Qing Yan, you came here today just to gloat, didn't you? Mark my words, you'll soon learn what it means when fortune turns. The day my husband becomes the top scholar, I'll finally hold my head high. What's so great about your general? A boorish brute. He reeks of vulgarity from the inside out." I covered my mouth, laughing until I was shaking like a leaf. Quite right. In the end, Du Kang is still more refined. Look at you, all the dirty, hard work in this household falls on your shoulders. Of course, a scholar's hands are meant for reading books. Otherwise, how could you be called his wife from humble beginnings? Wanzhou put up a brave front, but her hand slipped unconsciously behind her back. "We're enduring hardship before sweetness, someday our suffering will turn to joy. At least my husband and I share deep affection." Deep affection? I chuckled. Had she not noticed her husband's brothel visits? During the meal, Wanzhou served tirelessly. She attended not only her mother-in-law and husband but also Du Kang's demanding younger sister. By the end of the meal, she'd been running around like a headless chicken and could only scrape together some leftovers. Watching this, I felt a quiet satisfaction mixed with a chill. Not a single soul in the Du household was decent. This lifetime, they'd surely reap what they sowed. After dinner, Du Kang rushed out to the courtyard with his books, spouting Confucian platitudes to put on airs. "See? My husband will make it big someday." I smiled. Without my exam tips, he'd never amount to anything. With her stepmother's support, Wanzhou didn't have to scrape by washing clothes and mending garments like I did in my past life. But her family's subsidies would eventually run dry. Only then would Wanzhou understand what true hell on earth felt like. Sure enough, a month later at the scholar examination, Du Kang failed. Sitting in the carriage, I watched the light fade from Wanzhou's eyes. The recently defeated Du Kang shed his usual gentleness, snapping, "Who are you giving that deadpan face to?" If the questions hadn't been so damn hard this year, I would have passed. Du Kang's roar drew stares from passers-by. Wanzhou hurried to soothe him, softly explaining she hadn't meant it that way. But Du Kang shoved her violently and stormed off. After the crowd dispersed, Wanzhou, sitting on the ground, suddenly lifted her gaze toward me. Her expression was furious, her eyes blazing with intense hatred. Where did this hatred come from? I curved my lips slightly before lowering the curtain and calling out, "Let's go buy some jewelry." Wanzhou, who always loved wearing gold and silver, was now wearing nothing but a wooden hairpin. It made sense. Even with her lavish dowry, she couldn't withstand the Du family's relentless drain on her wealth. After returning home, I dispatched someone to keep an eye on Du Kang. Hearing he'd spent lavishly at the brothel that night, switching between 3 different girls, I clenched my fists in silence. No doubt in my past life, Du Kang had spent my silver with such reckless abandon too. A maid by my side asked, "Madam, should we inform the eldest miss of this? Given her temper, she'll likely cause an uproar, won't she?" I lowered my gaze and thought for a moment before replying slowly, "There's no rush. This lifetime, if I must hold back, I'll hold back big." While dispatching spies to monitor Wanzhou's movements, I secretly contacted Du Kang under a different identity. If I could predict exam questions in my past life, reincarnated, it was even more certain. With my assistance, Du Kang passed the county-level examination the following year. On the day the scholar returned home, Wanzhou specially sent word inviting me to dine at the Du residence. Upon meeting, Wanzhou beamed with pride. "My dear sister, didn't I tell you my husband was exceptional? Today he's a scholar, tomorrow a provincial graduate, and soon after, a top imperial scholar. Just watch and see." I sat at the table, smiling silently. Yet, a full hour passed before the meal was set, and still no sign of Du Kang. Both Du's mother and Wanzhou grew impatient. "How could he not be back by now? If your husband hasn't returned, isn't it all your fault as his wife?" Du's mother shot Wanzhou a fierce glare. "Dispatch someone to find him at once." The moment the servant dashed out, drunken banter and a woman's laughter echoed from the doorway. Wanzhou's brow furrowed, and she dashed outside. "Du Kang! Where did you find this disreputable woman?" I followed behind the others, stepping out at a leisurely pace. The flushed woman leaned unabashedly into Du Kang's embrace, her arms tightly wrapped around his waist. "Master Du, the mistress is so fierce." Du Kang staggered slightly, then pointed at Wanzhou with an air of authority. "This is Yenner, whom I redeemed from the brothel. Go prepare a room for her immediately." Wanzhou's eyes widened in shock. You brought a courtesan home?" Du's mother clapped her thighs gleefully beside them. "Excellent. Excellent. My son passed the scholar exam and now has a concubine. How could the Du family not prosper?" "Old hag, shut your mouth." Wanzhou, who had been holding back, finally erupted. "Wanzhou, how dare you speak to my mother like that? Wretch! Vicious woman! I am your mother-in-law. My son is a scholar." Wanzhou's eyes turned bloodshot, her body trembling slightly. Her hands clenched into fists, ready to explode at any moment. Now that's more like the arrogant and domineering Wanzhou. Seeing the Du family clearly unable to control Wanzhou, I whispered softly in her ear, "Sister, if you make a scene now, do you really think the position of chief minister's wife will still be yours in the future?" Having lived this life again, Wanzhou's sole ambition seemed to be this very thing. Even if it meant surpassing me someday, she wouldn't throw away everything she'd worked for at this critical moment. After I left, I could still hear Wanzhou demanding to know where Du Kang had found the silver to buy her freedom. Hilarious. Du Kang's pockets were emptier than his face. The silver for her redemption, of course, came from me. Within a month, the woman Du Kang had brought back died suddenly. After Zhe finished telling me this, he gently squeezed my hand. "It seems this was within your expectations, my lady." I lowered my gaze to hide the emotions churning in my eyes. Having endured so long under the hands of my stepmother and Wanzhou, I knew well their methods of torment. With my stepmother plotting behind the scenes, it was only natural that woman wouldn't last long. But her death wasn't entirely without blame. I clearly remembered that in my previous life, though she hadn't been redeemed, she had openly pointed at me in the street, mocking me as a woman who couldn't keep a man, a veritable hag. In this life, the hag had become Su Wanzhou. After this incident, however, Kang hadn't visited the brothel for quite some time. After some inquiries, I learned Su Wanzhou had completely erupted at the Du residence. She berated Kang's mother viciously, locked her in her room, and then personally supervised Kang's studies for his exams. But did she truly believe that by eliminating one yener, Kang would be clean? Outside, women came one after another, and Kang had always welcomed them all. 3 months later, Su Wanzhou relaxed her vigilance. When I heard Kang headed straight for a courtyard outside the capital upon his release, I chuckled. In my past life, I never even knew Kang kept a mistress. I kept my spies watching. Only when someone reported Kang frequenting the clinic did my heart finally settle. Then I had the final exam questions delivered to him. The next day, I returned to the Su residence. Su Wanzhou seemed to have given up entirely, spending every day at the Su household lately. As I entered, I overheard her furious rant. If it weren't for his potential, I'd never have married into this family. The whole lot of them disgust me. Especially that sister of his, she might as well be sleeping in the same bed as Kang. The legitimate mother sighed deeply. This can't go on forever. Stepping inside, I chimed in with a smile. I hear you've locked up Kang's mother and sister? Su Wanzhou and her mother frowned simultaneously. What business is that of yours? I shot them a reproachful glance. How is it none of my business? I'm also a daughter of the Su family. We rise and fall together. Don't you know what people are saying about you outside? Before they could retort, I continued earnestly, Sister, if you keep acting this way, once your husband truly rises to power, the first person he'll likely target is. Shut your mouth. Su Wanzhou slammed her hand on the table, her face flushing crimson with rage. Just as she was about to lash out at me, her mother grabbed her arm and shot me a meaningful look. What do you suggest we do? I smiled and patted Su Wanzhou's arm. Sister, your relationship with your husband was already exceptionally close before the wedding. Now that they're married, it's even stronger. Husbands and wives don't hold grudges overnight, they'll make up by the end of the night. Her stepmother's frown eased then deepened. Though she said nothing, the displeasure in her eyes grew. I calmly withdrew my gaze. As long as I achieve my goal, whether she's pleased or not is irrelevant. In my previous life, thanks to Su Wanzhou, I was forced to marry Kang. I poured my heart and soul into helping him cheat on exams and strategizing for him, enabling his meteoric rise to become the chief minister. Yet this ingrate, the moment he turned his fortune around, kicked me into the mud. Su Wanzhou deserves to taste this bitter flavor herself. Especially that venereal disease. It shouldn't be long now. Before nightfall, I sat by the window reading Kang's reply. Deeply grateful for your guidance, Master. Should I succeed in the examinations, I shall ensure you live out your twilight years in comfort at my residence. When Musée pushed open the door, I instinctively reached for the letter. But then I wondered, did Musée truly not know? You're back. I placed the unfolded letter plainly on the table, but Musée didn't glance at it once. He took my hand and led me toward the bed. After such a tiring day, my lady, would you like to? His words made my cheeks flush, and I quickly pulled him down to sit beside me. Why won't you look at this letter, my lord? Musée cast a brief glance. With this vast general's mansion resting solely on your shoulders, what's there to see in a single letter? Our eyes met, and I saw nothing but trust in his gaze. Do you think Kang might pass the imperial exams this time? Musée's dark eyes deepened as he pulled me into his embrace. If you say he can, then he can. 3 days later, the answer would be revealed. On the day the results were posted, the streets were packed with people. Musée and I watched quietly from a distance. Moments later, a shout of joy pierced the air. I passed. I really passed. I'm the top scholar. Following the sound, we saw Kang jumping and leaping excitedly in the crowd. His words drew a crowd of parents rushing to pull Kang toward them, eager to show off their own daughters. Kang's mother and sister were especially overcome, tears streaming down their faces. Heaven has eyes. Now my son is a scholar. Let's see who dares bully us. Just as the excitement peaked, soldiers pushed through the crowd from a distance. The crowd instantly fell silent. Though a hint of confusion flashed across Du Kang's face, he quickly straightened his back. Have you come to escort me to see His Majesty? The officers snorted derisively, then seized his shoulders, one on each side. Someone has beaten the drum to petition for justice. Come with us to the magistrate's office. The Du family panicked. Sitting in the carriage, Mu Zhe and I exchanged a glance. Mu Zhe actually played a role in this turn of events. I had tipped off Su Wanzhou about Du Kang keeping a mistress and contracting a venereal disease. Though furious, she surprisingly restrained herself from lashing out. It wasn't until Mu Zhe forged Du Kang's handwriting to draft a divorce letter, then slipped it into Du Kang's home under cover of night, only then did Su Wanzhou truly lose her mind. At the government office entrance, she knelt in the main hall, railing against Du Kang's actions. Du Kang's top-ranking status is completely bogus. Ask anyone, they'll tell you. He's nothing but a pretentious drunkard. Du Kang's mother and sister shouted outside, accusing Su Wanzhou of deliberately stirring trouble with a heart-deserving punishment. You just can't stand seeing my son prosper. Our Su family treated you well, is this how you repay us? Su Wanzhou laughed bitterly, pulling the divorce papers from her bosom and flinging them onto Du Kang's face. I endured so much hardship with you, and the first thing you do after rising is try to divorce me? Have you no conscience at all? Du Kang looked utterly bewildered. He picked up the divorce papers, glanced at them, and immediately protested, I didn't write this. You didn't? Su Wanzhou clapped her hands. Immediately after, someone brought in the 3 mistresses Du Kang had been keeping. Looks like you won't believe it until you see the coffin. With that, Su Wanzhou turned to face the crowd of onlookers outside. Everyone, judge for yourselves. His entire household lives off my dowry, yet he keeps mistresses. If they were decent girls from ordinary families, that might be one thing. But he craves the tricks of courtesans. He even infected me with venereal disease. Wah! Su Wanzhou broke down into sobs after uttering her final words. The crowd erupted in an uproar at her accusations. Does such a man deserve to hold office? The magistrate of the capital immediately summoned a physician to examine Du Kang. The doctor swiftly confirmed Du Kang's venereal disease. With irrefutable evidence, Du Kang was utterly speechless. His mother, overcome with grief and fury, gasped for air and collapsed. Du's mother died without recovery. The story spread through every street and alley, even inspiring storytellers to weave it into their tales. The next morning at court, Mu Zhe raised the matter again. The emperor immediately annulled Du Kang's examination results and permanently barred him from holding office. Du Kang went mad. When news of him surfaced again, the streets erupted in commotion. Du Kang, wielding a blood-soaked butcher's knife, slashed at anyone he encountered on the street, charging toward the imperial palace. He bellowed, outrageous. Blind fools. I'll demand answers from the emperor himself. Before he could reach the palace gates, Du Kang was struck down by a hail of arrows before he could even swing his knife. Mu Zhe accompanied me to the Du residence. No sooner had we arrived than my father rushed in, breathless. The moment we entered the room, the pungent stench of blood filled our nostrils. Wanzhou! Madam! My father bellowed. Mu Zhe immediately covered my eyes. It's too bloody. Don't look. My heart pounded violently, yet I still peered through my fingers. Even with mental preparation, the sight of 2 severed heads made me retch uncontrollably. My father sank to the floor in grief, his eyes vacant as he murmured, Your mother only said she'd bring Wanzhou back to pack her things, preparing for divorce. How could it end like this? Du Kang might truly have gone mad, or perhaps he was feigning it. Regardless, he had spent over a decade pretending to be a studious scholar from a poor family, clutching his Confucian texts. After finally passing the exams only to have it all ruined, how could he possibly accept this? 3 days later, the mother and daughter from the Su family were buried together. I followed behind, expressionless, yet my heart felt less joyful than I had imagined. Had they not relentlessly tormented me in my past life, would I have ever desired this outcome? In any case, my vengeance was complete. Musée remained quietly by my side. After a long while, I finally spoke. You know everything I've done, don't you? Why haven't you asked why I chose to destroy them? Musée looked at me, his dark eyes devoid of any unnecessary emotion. He poured me a cup of hot tea and said calmly, I know all the wrongs you suffered in the Su family. You married me, making you the general's wife. If even avenging yourself were forbidden, wouldn't that make me a rather useless general? I blinked, utterly surprised by Musé's words. When did you discover what I was doing? Musée smiled at this, a hint of resignation in his expression. His tone turned serious. Lady, do you know how many loose ends your husband has had to tie up? Huh? Kang isn't stupid. He followed the people you sent to contact him. And the business of redeeming people from the brothel? A simple inquiry would reveal it was your silver that paid for it. His words left me dumbfounded. Next time, you'll have to be more thorough. Oh. Right. I was at a loss for words. Was he hinting he wanted a repeat performance? How can I thank you? Musé's dark eyes sparkled. Without another word, he scooped me up and carried me toward the bed. My very life was saved by you, madam. How could I possibly accept your thanks? It's simply a matter of me putting in extra effort. My face flushed as I buried my head in Musé's embrace. Why was he becoming more and more unruly? And after last night's? Well, I was still feeling sore and weak all over. The end.